Recording. And Glenn knows that I've come to rely on him, consciously or unconsciously. So hello, everybody. Welcome, and please introduce yourselves in the chat. Let us know what brings you here tonight, what your name is, what organization you're with, if you're with an organization, what neighborhood council you're with, if you know your neighborhood council. And if you can change your Zoom picture name so that we can know where you're coming from, that is helpful as well. I should do the same thing. And let's get started. I'll share our initial slides. Uh-oh. Am I sharing the wrong thing? I think I am. Try that again. I have to move those. That's part of the problem.
Mr. Downey. So they loaned me a bassoon and I was just off and running. I was in every program I could possibly be in. Everyone around me was either a dance major, theater major, musician,
okay, if you can
breathe performing arts. Like
I guess I can
anything for that.
try to mute you, but if you can all mute yourselves, that would be great.
Like,
Maybe I need to do that. I guess I do need to do that. Oh, you did that yourself. Thank you very much. Okay, so please do introduce yourselves in the chat. Let us know what your neighborhood council or organization is and what brought you here today. That would be great. Thank you. We're the Neighborhood Council Sustainability Alliance, and we work to advance sustainability and resilience across the city through advocacy, sharing of best practices, and community action. We have a variety of committees and programs and working groups. We'll hear from a lot of these folks at the end of the meeting, but this is to give you a little flavor of when we meet and what we're up to. And you're all welcome to join us. Any stakeholder in the city of LA is welcome to join any committee or working group. So let us know if you're interested. We are recording, thanks to Glenn. Thank you, Glenn. If you can add your neighborhood council or organization next to your name or pronouns and your pronouns if you want, and introduce yourselves in the chat, please. You can use the raise hand feature to participate. This will be a very conversational, interactive conversation tonight. We have some community agreements that we'll share with you briefly, and we will put a link into the chat with an evaluation for an evaluation form, and we'd love to hear from you guys what you liked and what you did not like about this meeting, because we're always trying to tweak them so that we make sure that you folks are finding them worthwhile. Okay, our agenda tonight is we're doing our introductions and stuff right now. Then we'll hear a couple things from our board, and then we'll dive into the meat of the conversation, which is a conversation with LA Sanitation tonight about food waste. And then we'll hear about the Healthy Streets LA initiative, and those of us who are able to vote will vote on that. And then we'll also have a vote on two very new and very exciting building decarbonization motions. And then we'll hear back from our committee chairs and hear back from some programs. And then we will open it up for announcements. And then we will have evaluations. Here are our community agreements. I was just saying right before we got started that I feel like we might be moving a little bit into some in-person meetings soon. But for now, we are still on Zoom. And we'll always be to some extent on Zoom because this is such a helpful medium for such a large city. We were actually looking to do something along the lines of Zoom before the pandemic. So this is one of the silver linings for us. But it is a little harder to build community. So please, if you can, if you're able to, if you can turn on your camera and show your face, That really helps us build community, even though we are not actually together. Please assume good intent and give people the benefit of the doubt. We don't always agree, but that doesn't mean we don't all want the same things. If you can demonstrate respect and appreciation. We love the chat, but if you can use it constructively and in alignment with our topics, that is really helpful. And then we do want to hear from as many voices as possible. So if you tend to dominate a conversation, you might want to hold back a little bit. And if you tend to not join conversations, you might want to try to step up and be as concise as possible. And of course, have fun. Okay. I think we should get moving. I'd like to, so I should introduce myself. I'm Lisa. I'm with the Neighborhood Council Sustainability Alliance, and we have some board members here. I hope, I know I saw Ernie and I see Muriel and I see Lorraine. That's great. Muriel, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, so I'm also a steering board member. I'm the chair of the Transportation Committee, whose meeting is coming this 3rd of March. It's already March in a couple of days. And I was also formerly a board member of the Echo Park Neighborhood Council.
Great, thank you. And Lorraine, please introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Lorraine Lundquist. I'm zooming in from Northridge today and I'm a member of the board.
Thank you. And Ernie, if you can introduce yourself and also share your announcement or two, please.
Good evening, everyone. Ernie Hidalgo. Tonight is my last meeting as the chair of the NCSA. I had expressed to the board that I thought it was time for a transition back in, I wanted to make that transition in October, but we were still working on some things and you know, I hung on. However, I was recently accepted to the Southern California Association of Governments Housing Policy Leadership Academy, which is a tremendous opportunity. And it just happens to compete with the time that the board meetings are occurring for the NCSA. So now my first meeting will be tomorrow, and because of that, today will be my last day as chair. I do plan to remain engaged, much like Glenn Bailey has done, and some other folks who served on the board previously and are still participants just like everyone else here. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm very excited to see where the organization goes from here. I think as a sustainable organization, one of the important things to do is allow the opportunity for fresh blood, new ideas, new folks to come in, to have the experience of leadership and to express those ideas. So I look forward to seeing that. Thank you. The other announcement that I had is that Lisa and I had an opportunity to meet with the Office of the Mayor, and they're interested in doing an initiative. Well, it's not really an initiative. It's an effort around Earth Day. They would like to do 8 events because they break down the region of the city into 8 areas, and they would like to do 1 event in every area to celebrate Earth Day, utilizing the Green New Deal toolkit that we co-created with them. And so they're just looking for folks that would like to partner up with their neighborhood council and the mayor's office and do an activity, do an event. So if you are interested in that, I'll go ahead and type my email into the chat, and you can also reach Lisa, if you want to put your email there, and let us know if you are interested, and we'll forward that to the mayor's office so they can coordinate with you and your neighborhood council. And let's see, did I spell that correctly? Yes, there we go. I hope you guys will express some excitement and help host an event. Thanks. That's all for me.
Thank you, Arnie, and thank you so much for you stepped up at a time when we really needed you, and I don't know that you were prepared to step up, but you did step up. So thank you for being with us for so many years and helping guide us through. We've changed a lot. We've grown a lot in the last several years, and you've been with us every step of the way. So thank you very much. And Lorraine, you also wanted to make an announcement.
Yes. So, in light of the news that Ernie's stepping away, and Ernie, thank you so much for your service and for all of your leadership. We are looking for new board members. If you are interested in becoming a member of the board, please do reach out and let us know. We will send you an application. And potentially even looking for a chair. So if you're interested in serving on the board and helping lift this organization to even greater heights, we very much need the support and are excited to cultivate new leaders.
All right, thank you. All right, now I would like to hand it over to James Roska. And James, I should have made you a co-host. I'll do that in a minute. Hi, James. So James is with LA Sanitation, and he's been a leader, if not the leader, as far as I understand, of the effort to implement California State Bill or Senate Bill 1383, which is all about food waste, which is the first and primary topic of the evening. Back in December, when we asked you folks what you wanted to focus on in 2022, the really resounding cry we heard from you was organics, organics, organics. So there's been a lot of movement in the state. There is a lot more to do, and there is still an opportunity to weigh in. So we'd love to hear from James about the current state and what is being planned and what's at play and how we can weigh in. So James is going to make a presentation, but as always, we're going to be really interactive here. And so you can raise your hand and chime in during his presentation, and we'll just have a conversation and find out what's happening and how we can support the efforts. All right, James, I'm going to give you the floor, and thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Great, thanks for that intro, Lisa, and thanks everyone for having me. As Lisa mentioned, my name is James Roska. I'm an engineering associate in LA Sand and Environment. I'm also joined here today by my division manager, Robert Potter, but I'll be handling more of the presentation itself, and he'll be backing me up on any questions. Let me get my screen share set up. Let me know, is everyone able to see the PowerPoint I'm now presenting?
Yep.
Okay, great. And as Lisa mentioned, if there are questions throughout the presentation, we can make this more of a dialogue, kind of back and forth, discuss specific topics. Lisa, let me see if I can pull up the chat. I'm not sure if I'll be able to see everyone's hands raised while I'm operating the presentation. So if there's any questions, feel free to, I guess, stop me at the end of any of my slides if there's any topics that we want to kind of go further into.
I think I can see the raised hands on my end, so I'll keep my eyes on that.
Okay, I have a second screen here, so let me try and get a little bit of this set up too. Okay. So as Lisa mentioned, I'm going to be discussing some of SB 1383, kind of the biggest state legislation that's looking to address food waste and organic waste being diverted from the landfills, discuss some of the history of LA Sanitation and our role within the city for solid waste management, and what we've been doing over the past few years to try and address this question about food waste. So to give a pretty high level overview on SB 1383, this was a 120-page rule document that was prepared by the state over a number of years back in 2016 and was formalized in 2020, looking to target short-lived climate pollutants and greenhouse gases. And one of the main sections that they were looking to address this through was by targeting organic waste. Really, 1383 boils down to two main objectives. The first is waste reduction, so achieving a statewide reduction of food waste going to the landfill, or organic waste going to the landfill, by 75% by the year 2025. And additionally, to establish food rescue efforts and food rescue programs that are mandated by the state in order to rescue the amount of edible food that is being disposed of but can go to those in need. When you look at the definition of organic waste as set by the state, there's a lot of different materials that fall into these categories. So green waste, landscaping, wood and lumber, paper, horse manure, and the items that I've listed in green are all materials that LA San already collects or manages, either through our normal bin programs or through specific pilot programs and collection programs. Really, the last item that we need to address is that food waste component. 1383, in terms of some of the requirements, I wanted to put 3 of these high-level ones in here. So organic waste collection services. So jurisdictions are required to provide collection services to all generators. That's single family households, commercial businesses, restaurants, apartment complexes. Basically, it's on jurisdictions to set up collection programs to separate all of the food waste, organics, recyclables, and trash, and make sure that everything goes into the proper bins so that they can be collected for recycling. The jurisdiction is also required to provide outreach and education. So obviously, educating our constituents, our customers on how to participate in the program, the requirements of collection and separation, and additionally the benefits. Really, what is the purpose of us removing all of this food waste from the black bin, and the environmental and health benefits that are associated with it. And then lastly, as I mentioned, the edible food recovery program. The state has identified large commercial generators of edible food waste. These are restaurants, farmers markets, wholesale grocery markets, places where the state has identified there's a lot of food that ends up going to waste, but is in really good condition or could be rescued and be able to go into the hands of those that need it. So the state is actually going to require businesses to enter agreements with food rescue organizations and nonprofits to try and collect and rescue as much food as possible before it even ends up into a bin. And then the state or the city has to work with these food rescue organizations in terms of planning their capacity, tracking what these partnerships look like, seeing how much food is being rescued through each of these agreements and programs, and getting this information out to really, everyone that's wanting to participate, whether it's businesses that are looking to donate excess edible food or those that need access to that food once it's being rescued and provided to those in need. So that was a really high level overview on 1383. And I'm going to shift gears more onto the city's focus and scope. So through the LA Green New Deal, as well as various plans and goals implemented by our council and mayor, the city of LA is really a lead in terms of zero waste initiatives. This first bullet point that I have here are our own city zero waste goals. So as set by the Green New Deal, we have a goal of achieving 90% diversion from landfills by 2025, 95% by 2035, and 100% by 2050. So that means by the year 2050, no waste from the city of LA will go into a landfill. Additionally, even more aggressive than SB 1383, we have a goal to remove all organic waste from the landfill by the year 2028. And then I've listed some specific programs and targets that we were looking to implement to address some of the collection and diversion of these organic waste materials. So setting up food scrap drop-off locations at farmers markets, launching a citywide collection program for food scraps, which I know is a big interest, and I'll be going into more detail on that later. And then recovering and distributing edible food through our commercial partnerships and partnerships with food rescue organizations. In terms of how solid waste is managed in the city, there's really 2 methods of collection. The first is you are a customer that is serviced by the city of LA, so by LA Sanitation and Environment. We provide the collection services to all of the single family households, as well as we do small multifamily complexes of 4 units or less, and we provide the black bin, blue bin, and green bin service for all of those customers. Our commercial franchise system, or CECLA, is responsible for all of the commercial accounts throughout the city. So that's all the commercial businesses, restaurants, large multifamily complexes, condos, industrial users. They're the ones that are responsible for providing the waste collection services for those private businesses. And then I've listed here the amount of waste that we see coming from each of those sectors. So from the 750,000 households in the city, we collect about 1 million tons a year of trash that goes to the landfill. And then on the commercial side, we collect about 1.5 million tons. So some of these numbers have shifted through COVID. We saw a little bit of an increase in the residential side as more people were working from home. But as businesses and as folks have kind of switched back to working in the office or going out more, some of that material has moved back onto the commercial sector.
James?
Oh, Lisa, do you have a question?
Yeah, so you said you saw an increase on the residential side during COVID. Did you see a corresponding decrease on the commercial side during
Yes.
COVID?
Yes, so we did see, and we saw that there was a pretty one-to-one shift in terms of where the waste was being disposed of. But
Okay.
we've seen some of those numbers kind of shift back to the trend of commercial being higher than, well, even before, during the shift, commercial was still producing higher disposal numbers than residential.
Okay, thank you. And Ed, you can just raise your hand on the, if you know how to raise your hand in Zoom, then I'll see you and you can ask a question. But
You know,
go
it's kind of
ahead,
weird. I
yeah.
don't see the raise the hand thing. I'm
Okay.
looking and I'm looking, and that's
Okay, well then go ahead. Go ahead, Ed.
well, I wanted to ask, especially because for all of us really to light the fire on this particular subject, I think the understanding is that we have to really, really comprehend the large amount of methane that we are looking not to emit. Because right now, the recent UN climate talks that were in Scotland, the big push is to reduce methane by 30% by 2030. And the only way we're going to get there, or, is going to be through managing food waste. And it was nicely listed, the other elements that go into the landfill that also give methane gas. But I think we have to go back to our councils and really light that fire, because we're hearing the details, but we're not explaining the why necessarily to our neighborhood councils. And it really is to make the planet a better place, reduce methane gases, make it a greener planet, those kinds of things. So I'm hoping that doesn't get lost, because personally, when I see X amount of tons of waste being disposed, I would love to then see what the equation is then for CO2 emissions, what it is for methane, so that we're able to really connect these dots and sell it to our councils. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed, and definitely that's a great point. And I think I'll be able to go into some of those details, maybe not specifics on numbers, but I think hopefully the next few slides will kind of elaborate some of those points that you're bringing up. So on this slide, you'll see this was a study that was done back in 2016 at the Sunshine Canyon landfill. This is the primary landfill that the city uses for the disposal of its black bin waste. So we did a study where a consultant basically sorted out by hand the trash that was being delivered to the landfill. And you can see from our residential black bin, over 50% of the material is organic in nature. And right to your point, Ed, all of these organic materials when in the landfill are the causes of that methane being produced and being released into the atmosphere. So you can see that food waste is really one of the largest components in terms of the organic material still in the landfill. Although we do have a green and blue bin program in place, we still do see a large amount of green waste and some paper wastes that still end up in the landfill despite having collection systems. And a lot of this paper waste, some of the challenges with this are items such as paper towels, food soiled paper, paper that's a lot more difficult to recycle when comparison to maybe like office paper or printing paper, which is really collected more easily through our conventional blue bin program. And then we do have other organics that still end up in the landfill. These are things such as textiles, carpets, rubber, cotton fiber. So these are really things that can't be easily collected through any of our bin programs, but LA Sane is looking for different ways to collect them, whether it's through pilot programs, working directly with manufacturers and producers, promoting more donation and reuse of goods as opposed to disposal. So really we need to look at other ways to tackle this category as well. But right, in terms of the organic methane generators in the landfill, right, food waste is that largest portion, both in terms of the weight as well as the potential to generate methane. So I think Ed kind of already beat me to it here. But right, so what is kind of the question here? What is the cause for concern? So right, when these organic materials are placed in the landfill, once they go into your black bin and get thrown into the landfill is an anaerobic environment. This means there is no oxygen in the landfill. As material is dumped, it's covered through the landfill operations, and they continue just piling on material like that. When organic waste is placed into the landfill, organic material is in the landfill, it decomposes, and as a result, methane and carbon dioxide are the two things that are produced by these microorganisms consuming that organic material. So landfills do have gas capture systems, especially engineered modern landfills. So these systems are in place to try and through negative pressure, vacuum and capture the gas within the landfill so that it can be taken to a plant to either produce energy as opposed to just going out into the atmosphere. The challenge with these systems is because landfills are so large and because they're really difficult to manage in terms of what's under the covered portion, trying to manage that gas in an effective way and really utilize the benefits of it in terms of energy production are difficult. So ideally, if we can pull these organic waste from the landfill in the first place, and then find beneficial uses for them, such as composting or digestion, those are really much more beneficial than having them in the landfill and the chance for off gases and all these other things. So I'm going to now shift gears into really what are all of the existing programs and work that LA San has done. And I'm going to kind of do it in the hierarchy of best practices and then getting down to collection. So, one of the comments that I think I've heard a lot is, how do we even prevent food waste from happening in the first place? We put a lot of emphasis on 1383 in terms of collection programs. How do we provide everyone the ability to recycle food waste? But ideally, we stop food waste from happening before it even needs to go into the bin. Some of the things that we've looked at in terms of a lot of outreach and education are on food waste prevention. So this is through smarter shopping, not buying in excess, making sure you check what you already have at home before you go to the store, understanding proper food storage. So how best to, keep foods in good condition at home before you use it, whether that's freezing, refrigeration, and then additionally understanding date labels. There's been a lot of talk over the past few years in terms of how goods are labeled from a food product safety standpoint, and really trying to educate people that some of those date labels are either misleading or are more on a product turnaround from a commercial standpoint, as opposed to actual food safety. So really trying to just make people aware of some of these statistics and metrics, and really just trying to prevent food waste from happening in the first place. Additionally, I think as we've seen through 1383 and also some of the programs that LA San has already been working on, food rescue. If you have excess food that you've purchased, or if commercial businesses have excess food, rather than placing it into a bin to be collected, how can they get it into the hands of those that are in need? Thankfully, through our Recycla program, which started back in 2017, we've had a requirement for all of our commercial Recycla providers to work with commercial businesses to establish food rescue partnerships, as well as funding for food rescue. Over the past 4 years, our commercial businesses have been working with a number of nonprofit partners in collaboration with the city, and we've provided, or our Recycla service providers have provided over $2 million to support food rescue organizations. This is in terms of new equipment, refrigeration, trucking and staffing, really support to be able to allow them to do the work to rescue this food and get it into the hands of those in need. And as a result of that $2 million in additional funding, over 16,000 tons of food have been rescued over the past 4 years, which is the equivalent of serving almost 28 million meals being served to members of our community. Additionally, LA San has been working and has identified additional funding through different grants and programs. And so starting this year, we're looking to add an additional $1 million to provide local food grants to expand additional work to support food rescue. The next program that we have is also, looking at ways to compost, whether that's in your own backyard or within your communities. LA San has been hosting backyard composting workshops for over 20 years. We first started at 2 locations at Lopez Canyon and Griffith Park. And we actually expanded in 2017 to an additional site down in South LA. At each of these workshops, LA San staff and community partners can teach residents how to start composting at home, whether that's through a backyard composting bin, a worm composting bin, as well as information on things such as urban gardening, water conservation, drought tolerant plants, local gardening that you can do that like works for the climate here in LA. So a lot of really great resources and information at all of these workshops. Unfortunately, we did put these workshops on hold back in 2020 due to COVID, but we are looking to resume them starting this spring. So hopefully we will be reopening at all 3 of our locations. And we are additionally planning on opening a 4th backyard composting workshop down in the harbor.
James, Ed has another question or comment, and Eric might. Ed, do you want to go ahead? Okay, Ed might not. Eric, did you want to chime in or not?
I was just going to ask when they were going back live with these, and James answered that.
Got
So
it.
coming soon, right?
Yes, we're hoping that in March, we should hopefully be able to do one at each of these locations, or like one weekend workshop at each of those locations, and then be able to resume them regularly afterwards.
Hi, sorry, I muted myself. James, with this particular program, it looks like it's geared more for single family housing. And as the city continues to move more to higher housing density with transportation nodes, is there a possibility of composting workshops that hit multifamily and condo developments as well?
Yeah, definitely. We do at these compost workshops teach residents how to produce worm composting bins as well. These are a lot smaller and can actually be stored indoors and are another great way of, composting excess food scraps that you have at home. So that is a great option for people that don't have an actual yard to do composting within. And additionally, we are also looking at different ways we can look at community-based options for composting. On my next slide, we've done a lot of research and we have identified there's a large network of community gardens as well as farmers markets throughout the city. And we think that these could be locations where people are already meeting, have spaces, are working in their environment and working with soils. And really, it's a great connect directly to have opportunities to do composting, right? Rather than just at home, you can do it with your neighbors, with your community. It's a great way to kind of make those connections. Additionally, we have seen programs at farmers markets where residents are able to drop off food scraps, and then those food scraps are taken by a nonprofit or a local organization that'll then compost them, whether that's at a community garden or some other community space where they can do the compost and then bring it back to the participants of that garden. One of the nonprofits that's really active in this space is LA Compost. They already have 2 farmers market locations set up, I believe in Silver Lake or Echo Park, and then in Highland Park as well, I believe.
Silver Lake, and I don't know if Ji Young is here because I can't see everybody right now, but
Here.
hi, Ji Young, do you want to chime in for a minute?
Sure. Yeah, I got to work on it. I started working on it last June or July, and it went live the Saturday before last. So bring your scraps.
Yeah, can you say, Ji Young, we can maybe talk about it later, but can you say a few more sentences about how you did that?
So basically, I just reached out to LA Compost, and my understanding is that they were looking to expand anyway. And so I got the sense that I was just kind of speeding up the process with respect to the Silver Lake Farmers Market. And my understanding is that they're going to continue to expand. And, we passed a neighborhood purpose grant because the LA Compost is a 501c3. And so we got them to come earlier than they would have otherwise, I guess.
Yeah, thank you. So I think what Chi Young did with the Silver Lake Neighborhood Council is super cool. And I've highlighted that because I think it's a model for what other neighborhood councils can do. But I know Ji Young was like, was this going to happen anyway? So that's something James and I have talked about. So I'm wondering if James, if you can address that question. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And I know LA Compost, right, they have had a lot of interest from both neighborhood councils, farmers markets, and even just smaller businesses looking to set up, their own composting systems. If they have some sort of open space or like a park. So there's definitely been a lot of talk and interest with LA Compost because they do a lot of great work. Thankfully, we applied for a USDA grant in collaboration with LA Compost and actually received almost $100,000 in grant funding. So we are looking to expand this program to additional farmers markets, as well as community composting locations in the city starting this spring. So we are working with LA Compost to identify additional farmers markets, hoping to expand to various portions of the city. So as you can see on the map, we've identified a number of farmers markets as well as community gardens or community spaces where they can expand these types of food waste drop-off and composting programs. And then LA Compost is also working on developing larger composting hubs where they can do kind of larger scale composting, even greater than some of these community-based options. I see we have two hands raised, I think, from Liz and Ed.
Yes, Liz, go ahead.
Okay, two things. First of all, I was very pleased to hear that there was a drop-off in Highland Park, and I went on to look at the website and found that it was at 3 p.m. On a weekday afternoon, and which may be lovely for people who don't work, but isn't very beneficial for those of us who do. How are you going? And I did notice that almost all the other ones were on weekends. Are you going to expand that? Secondly, what are you networking with other cities on best practices? My sister lives in Toronto, and they've been putting out their compost in a sealed little bin with their recyclables for at least a decade, if not 2 decades at this point. When can we expect that? And have you looked at other cities' best practices? Thank you.
Okay, I think that was maybe 4 questions, but that was a lot of good questions. So, James.
Yeah, so we definitely do work with lots of other cities in terms of exchanging information. When looking at actual collection programs, so right, as you mentioned, being able to put food waste into your green bin, we've spoken with a number of different municipalities that have had programs from San Francisco to New York, and including City of Toronto. We actually had staff that have met with City of Toronto and their program managers on how they expanded their program. Similarly, in terms of some of these food waste drop-off or community composting programs, we have met with other jurisdictions that have received the grant funding from the USDA. So cities such as Portland, Denver, New York City as well, on their different types of programs and how they all work. So definitely we are looking to share all these best management practices. On the question on the timeline.
Well, let me slow you down a smidgen, James. Are some of those, are we looking at adopting some of those, or do you feel like some of those are not viable for here, or what are you thinking?
I think a lot of the information that we've shared has been, it's kind of like our plans already do align with the ways that their programs were set up. And definitely a lot of them had a lot of active involvement with either community-based or nonprofit partners. And I think we also saw from a lot of the interest around LA Compost that was really the direction that some of these programs were launching off. So I think we're in good standing in terms of, you know, being on the right track to really replicate some of these other existing models.
Okay, thank you.
And then in terms of I think the last question was on the timeline for when residents can do the food waste in their bin. I'll touch on that a little later into the presentation. That'll be the kind of the next focus we'll shift over to.
Okay,
think
thank
there's
you.
a
We've got
couple
lots
other
more
hands.
raised hands, and I think you can see them now, James. Ed.
Yes.
Sure. James, is the composting program kind of looking at that social equity angle? Because I mean, I think this is that perfect time to overlap social equity and sustainability in a way that makes sense, particularly with composting. And at the same time, maybe this is more for the other neighborhood councils, you know, trying to link this composting with food security in particular neighborhoods, and then hooking up with our native biodiversity. Cal State Northridge has the native seed library. We got all these incredible gardens throughout the area to kind of, I don't know, start linking that kind of stuff. You know, composting and gardens and food security, I think, is important. And I'm hoping these kinds of programs lead to that.
Yeah, definitely. Great comment, Ed. And we are definitely taking a lot of that into account in terms of equity and making sure that these types of programs are made available, especially in, you know, socioeconomic and food impoverished areas. On our organics team, we thankfully do have staff that are managing both the food rescue program as well as our healthy soils and biodiversity programs also involved. So, right, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head that all of these programs do kind of have a synergy and a nexus around food and really looking at every aspect of it. So we definitely are looking at making all of that kind of aligned in terms of how we do these programs moving forward, as well as outreach, education, messaging, all those different types of things.
Yeah, and I should add that the NCSA is involved with the Healthy Soils Initiative, which does connect a lot of these pieces. And so I've seen firsthand that LA San is connecting these pieces. Christine.
Hi, I imagine you'll get to this, but the one issue that's kind of been stumping me, we do have composting in our community. We're trying to connect people to more, but the piece that I can't get my head around is like the animal waste, because LA Compost doesn't take it. I mean, like if you eat animal products, like where those animal product can be disposed of at this point in time, besides putting it in a bucket and sealing it. So I just don't know what to do about that. And I also wondering if there's an assistant or any aid we can get to, like at our animal shelter. They don't do any green bins, and with there's certain amount of the small animal care, that's all like green waste and hay and that kind of thing. So I'd love to be able to figure out how to friendly push my local shelter to start doing some green waste implementation too. Not sure how to do that best.
Yeah, so on the first question about what types of food waste can be handled, right through this LA Compost model, it is really more the fruits and vegetables, really kind of those things that are vegetated. But things that are more like leftover meat or bones, right, those really can't be handled through these smaller, more localized community composting. The compost piles just don't get hot enough to really be able to break down some of those meats or cheeses or dairies the same way like fruits and vegetables easily break down. Once we get to the kind of full-blown collection program, you know, where residents will be able to put food scraps into their green bin, we will be able to address that because we are working or looking to work with more commercial scale composting facilities. So they have the ability to break down things such as bones or leftover meat or cheese and dairy, which, right, you really shouldn't put into your community composting or backyard composting bin.
But so that's only going to come then once the curbside pickup pieces.
Yes.
Okay.
And then to the question regarding animal shelters, if it's a shelter within the city of LA, I believe they are serviced through Recycla. So all Recycla customers are able to already request organic services through their Recycla service provider. So right, if there is green waste or bedding or leftover food waste from the care of those animals, there is the ability for that shelter to subscribe to an organic waste collection service. And technically under SB 1383, they are actually they are required to sign up for that type of service in order to be compliant with the collection requirements of the state.
Okay, and I feel like we're jumping around, but that's how it goes. Steve?
Yeah, are you going to address what the requirements are for an institution like ours, which is a temple? What are the numbers at which we have to do something, and when does it have to go into effect? And then the other question is, what about food that goes down into the sewer system, passing a garbage disposal? Is that allowable, or is that not going to be allowable in the future?
So yeah, on the question regarding individual businesses or entities, we are still working through that. Some of the size requirements or de minimis requirements are still being determined, both with the city and with CalRecycle. So really trying to identify, who are those really small producers that won't really have food waste, as opposed to maybe like a grocery store or a restaurant. So we're still working on each of those different requirements and conditions. And then in regards to the second question with garbage disposals are actually a great tool that residents can currently use for some of that leftover food waste, whether it's just, like plate scrapings or trimmings, right? The material does get ground up by your garbage disposal, goes through the sewer system. If you're a City of LA resident, it will arrive at one of our wastewater treatment plants, where the material is actually recycled to produce energy through digestion at the wastewater treatment plants. So that is also a really great avenue that folks can use in the meantime. We have conducted some studies and pilots on it in the past as well, looking to promote the use of garbage disposals. And right, we wouldn't prohibit them in the future. Even once we switch to the curbside program for the green bin and expand it, if residents still want to continue using their garbage disposal for maybe incidental amounts of food waste, definitely they can still do so.
So what if you used to choose your garbage disposal for all your green waste in the institution? Do you visualize that may be acceptable?
So the challenge with that is that per 1383, we must provide collection for single family customers. So regardless of whether you produce food waste or not, we have to allow it in the bin. And we have to have our program align with the requirement for collection of food waste.
I'm sorry, I'm addressing the institution.
Similarly for institutions, if you produce food waste, it does need to be collected either through a bin, or you must self-haul it to a facility that can recycle those materials. I think there are also restrictions on commercial institutions, such as restaurants or fast food stores. I think there are wastewater restrictions on them being allowed to use garbage disposals. I think that's a sewer concern from these larger commercial entities. And I think that has more to do with fats, oils, and grease concerns as to why they aren't able to put down a lot more of that larger like commercial food waste through a garbage disposal.
But just to
What
be
about-
sure,
Go ahead.
quantitative, but you're saying these numbers are still in work as to what's going to be allowable and how much. Is that right for institutions?
Yes, from my understanding in terms of the collection, we're still really looking at what all those different generators volumes look like. On 1383, it is supposed to be anyone that produces organic waste, but jurisdictions can set waivers or de minimis amounts that can exempt businesses, but we're still looking at what those types of volumes may look like.
So
Thank you.
sorry, I think we are jumping around a lot, but I wondered this and I'd forgotten to ask you, James, what is the deal with, and forgive me if you answered this, what is the deal with disposals? Is that bad for the environment, better for the environment, neutral for the environment? Just, I mean, how does that compare to other methods? Does that make sense?
In comparison to landfilling, you know, it's definitely beneficial, because right as we put food waste down the sewer system, it goes to our treatment plants, it gets turned into biogas through our anaerobic digesters, and the plant actually uses that to produce electricity to fuel their own operations. So reducing the electricity use of the plant itself. In comparison to compost, the state does value compost over instant garbage disposals, though they don't disqualify garbage disposals as something that residents can do at their own homes. But in terms of collection programs or programs for food waste, they're really looking for collection and then going to either compost or anaerobic digestion.
Okay, that kind of, okay, that's okay. I'll let that, okay, go ahead. And so we do have more questions, and at some point I might have to get us back to James if this keeps up, but John and Michelle.
Yes, thank you. James, quick question. With all of these composting, the community composting, farmers markets, etc., I would think, just me, I would think that there's a huge partner out there, the different school districts, and teaching the kids composting and proper handling of these. And on the second side of that same coin, the schools, they produce a lot of free meals for the kids, breakfast, etc. And as the kids go through these lunch lines, they're just pouring the milk out, they're dumping it all into big containers. Thoughts on that? I think the schools would be an excellent partner.
Yeah, definitely. I do know there has been a lot of work with LAUSD in trying to address some of the challenges with food waste, as well as some of their own requirements in terms of right distribution of food, whether it's through their various programs or their health guidelines. We've been working with Republic, who does service all of the LAUSD schools. They're the contractor that provides service. And we have also worked with County Public Health in the past to try and address some of the disposal of food items that kids are required to take, even if they won't consume it, and finding ways to be able to then rescue that food as opposed to just disposing it. So I know a lot of schools are implementing share tables where, you know, if let's say a student picks up a carton of milk that they're not going to use, but they're required to take it as part of the meal, they can place it on a share table where another student can then, you know, take that food and make sure it doesn't go to waste. Or other after school programs in terms of having excess food and either getting that to a local food rescue organization or even just for students to be able to take home at the end of the day. So there is definitely a lot of work that's starting around that, but I think definitely that is another huge area to address in terms of food waste.
And the educational side of that coin is probably just as important. Thank you.
Yes, definitely. I think some of the challenges with that, I know it sometimes varies on if there's a champion within the school. And that could be a science teacher or a health teacher really trying to incorporate some of this messaging and information into their curriculum. But right, it isn't currently standardized in LAUSD curriculum in terms of, you know, compost or food, understanding some of these things. In the past, we did have a pretty robust recycling outreach program that we conducted with schools. So there may be opportunities in the future to kind of bring a similar program back, but addressing more of the organics and food waste. But I think that is kind of the challenge with the school district as a whole, as opposed to individual schools that may have kind of a champion bringing some of these topics as part of their curriculum.
Well, and I did want to mention Emily Spokes, who could not join us tonight, but who I might join us I think will join us in a future meeting. Eric, whose hand is up next, can speak to what she's done. She's done a lot of cool stuff in schools. So Eric, maybe you can mention that before you mention whatever you were going to mention.
Okay, the thing I was going to mention is, my understanding is that any business producing 2 cubic yards of waste a week must have organics collection. So that's what my understanding was. But as far as the schools go, there's a group called Angelinos for Green Schools. And I work with a mom named Emily Spokes, who's also part of this group, but I don't think she's here tonight, and working to implement organic separation at 2 charter schools in one in Atwater Village, one in Eagle Rock. And it really does take a lot of effort to dump those trays of food that the kids don't eat and get it out. But it's got to happen. So anybody who wants to spend lunch hour helping kids do that, that's what it takes. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Eric. Saray.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Hello. Well, thank you for the opportunity to ask my question. I already asked it in the chat, but I'll ask it again. I think they basically relate to the schools, but what I'm wondering is there a way to? You mentioned prevention. Hello, am I being able to be heard?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, sir. You mentioned food waste prevention. So I'm thinking, and then there was a gentleman who did touch on the question that I'm about to ask about low income communities. But what I'm wondering is there a way we can be even more direct with a agency such as the DPSS, where you get food stamps, and maybe getting some flyers or some kind of messaging for low income families, who may not necessarily understand organics, but they don't want their food to be wasted, or we can get some kind of messaging to them about food waste prevention at the grocery store or even at the home. I think that would be great. And one last quick question about the presentation. Can we have access? Thank you.
What was the last question?
May we please have access to the PowerPoint presentation?
Oh.
Yeah, we should be able
Okay.
to send a copy over to Lisa so that she can distribute it to the participants. And then, yeah, I think the comment that you had about, right, being able to have some of those more focused or targeted outreach and messaging is definitely things that we want to include. As I mentioned, under 1383, we do have to do outreach and education to all generators in the city. So the city is looking on doing kind of a robust citywide campaign addressing and targeting all of these things. So I think that's a great comment that you had.
James, I'm going to mute everybody. I don't think that mutes you because you're a co-host, but just in case, I muted you.
Okay, and if not, I think I should.
Oops, it did mute you. So yes, please unmute yourself.
Okay.
Thank you.
Awesome. I think if there's no questions, I know there's quite a few discussions going on in the chat. So sorry if I haven't been able to address any specific ones.
We'll try to get to them, but yeah.
Yeah, I think in the interest of time, I'll continue through the presentation. And then I'll also have my contact information at the end in case, there's any additional questions or follow-up too. So continuing on, right, I've covered a lot of the prevention and before the bin programs, food rescue, backyard and local community composting. But now I'm going to get down to, I think a lot of the interest is on the actual bin program. So LA San is responsible, as I mentioned, for the collection of all of these single family households, as well as small complexes of 4 units or less. We provide the black bin for the trash, blue bin for recyclables, and then organics are collected through our green and brown bin. On average, we collect 1,600 tons per day of yard waste and horse manure from the city. And that's every day, Monday through Friday, throughout the entire 750,000 households. The materials that we collect in the green bin are grass, leaves, weeds, and tree branches. We do allow fruits and vegetables, but there's a little asterisk on those fruits and vegetables. It should really just be fruits and vegetables coming directly from your garden. So basically things that come directly from your yard, fruits and vegetables that come as just part of your regular yard maintenance, but maybe you aren't going to eat them. You can find someone to give them away to. You can place them in your green bin. But you really shouldn't be putting food scraps or food waste into your green bin. And I'll go into a little bit more on that next. And then clean wood and other wood materials can go into your bin. And then we do have a brown bin for residents that have horses on their private property. So we do collect horse manure and hay and stable bedding from single family households if you subscribe to a brown bin. So food scraps and food waste currently can't go into the green bin. One of the main reasons for this is that the facilities that we currently work with, the private vendors that actually manage the waste, they do a green waste only processing. They take all of the leaves, the branches, the wood, pull out any trash from the green bin, grind up that material, and then that is the finished product. That is just a mulch or a chip and grind product that we give out to residents. So residents are able to get it at one of our many mulch or compost pickup locations, or it's marketed to agriculture up towards Kern County and LA County. As you add food waste into the type of material that's collected, it needs to go through a much more robust process. So as I mentioned, either composting or anaerobic digestion. In the past, there had been very few of these facilities in the Southern California area, and there still are very few facilities that have the capacity to do this type of collection. But in preparation to 1383, LASAN already started doing some pilots to try and look at food waste collection and starting to work with vendors who can do this commercial composting. This took place through a program called Curb Your Food Waste LA. This was a residential pilot program that was offered to 18,000 households throughout the city, covering neighborhoods throughout all 15 council districts. And this was a food waste prevention and a food waste collection program. So kind of speaking to all the things I mentioned at the beginning of the program, we first educated residents on how to prevent food waste from happening in the first place. Understanding date labels, shopping smart, storing your food properly. And then in the event that residents did have food scraps left over at the end of the day, how could they collect them and recycle them through the green bin? During this pilot, we also worked with community groups and nonprofits, so LACC, Pacoima Beautiful, as community partners to do a lot of the on-the-ground work, so distributing kitchen countertop pails, informational materials, pamphlets, flyers, and addressing resident questions as we were onboarding people onto the program. Here you can see some of the educational material that was prepared. So this booklet had kind of all of the steps for how to participate. So shop smart, waste less, recycle the rest, reduce, reuse, recycle, and then information on steps on how to use this kitchen countertop pail. So this is a little 2-gallon pail that was provided to all of our participants so that they could collect their food scraps throughout the week. And then once they collect their food scraps, they can place them in their green bin. And then your green bin is collected with the food waste and the green waste during your normal weekly collection by your LASAN collection operator. So this program started back in 2019 to the 18,000 households. We did a lot of outreach and education to these households, put on community events, as well as conducted some technical studies to see, were residents actually using the bin? Were we seeing more food waste in the green bin? As well as surveys on what residents thought were, how did they feel about participation? Did they have any thoughts or concerns or questions? And how to get in touch with the city if they were looking for more resources. So I know in terms of next steps for how we can bring this program citywide, as I mentioned, most of our vendors now only provide the green waste processing services. So the next step now for the city is to bring on vendors that can do the collection and processing of the green waste plus the food waste. So the team that I work on released a request for proposals, an RFP, back in October, basically looking for new commercial vendors to come on to work on this program, execute contracts and agreements with the city, and for them to be able to process the food waste and the green waste combined. So once we have these contracts in place, we will have the ability to then expand the program to the rest of the households throughout the city. And then additionally, one of the things that we need to consider is the cost of this program. When we look at just green waste processing by itself, you know, that chipping and grinding of the grass, the leaves, and the tree branches, that's a very quick and very easy process, you know, comparatively to composting, which is a much longer and more resource intensive process. It's typically more expensive to handle this type of material. So almost twice as expensive to go through composting or anaerobic digestion. So we really do also as a city need to look at the financial implications of expanding this program. And that is part of our recommendations that we gave to the council committee when we presented on this last week. So one of our recommendations was also to look at the considerations and also to request additional funding from the state to try and support the expansion of these types of programs. So taking all of kind of the program into consideration, all the points that I've touched on, we released our RFP to bring on new vendors last October, and we're currently working on evaluating all of the proposals that we've received from private vendors and are also working on negotiating these contracts. Come this spring, so in the meantime, you know, as residents don't currently have access to the green bin program for food waste, what are some of those alternatives? So residents can still use their instant garbage disposal. We're establishing these farmers market drop-off locations and community composting hubs. And right, just continuing to also educate residents on how to what's it called, on how to prevent food waste from happening in the first place. Starting by this summer, so by July, we do hope to, or do plan to expand to up to 40,000 households to have the collection program in the green bin. The reason we're going with 40,000 households is because we have one processor currently on board who's already handling the 18,000 households, and they can expand up to 40,000 households in terms of the capacity we have with them. We would need to execute the contracts from the RFP by the end of the year. And that is also part of our recommendation to the council, is for them to support us through the contract execution process, so that once these contracts are in place, we can then expand the program to the rest of the city by the end of the year. So our goal is for all residents to be able to use their green bin for food waste recycling by December 31st, 2022. So really that is our timeline, I think, to the question that a lot of folks have had about, you know, when they can start using their green bin for food waste. That is our target date for the curbside program as collected by LA-SAN. And I think that is my last slide. And there is my contact information for anyone that has additional follow-up or questions. And I think I still see quite a few comments in the chat as it's been zoomed by. I think I see Eric has a hand up.
James, I just want to thank you for sharing that timeline with us. That's been the big question for a while. And to see it there in black and white is, it's exciting. So thanks for sharing that.
Definitely, thanks, Eric. I think next hand is Nish, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yeah, it's Nish. So yeah, thanks for the presentation, James. I live in downtown, and a lot of the members of a lot of members in this neighborhood, in this community, live in apartment buildings. And I think you touched on it earlier about how you plan on implementing this program for those who live in multi-unit house or multi-unit residences. And it's still not clear to me how how LA San plans on doing that. Like, do you envision like each like household in apartment or each apartment like having their own like collection bin, like in that image that you showed earlier, and then like dropping it off at a collection center? Or will there be like a site that will collect like food scraps in each apartment building by December 31st?
So this timeline is really for single family households and the 4 units or less that are serviced by LA San. If you are in a larger multifamily complex, that is serviced through our Recycla program. So that'll vary based on which Recycla service provider is responsible for the area of the city that you live in and what type of collection program they'll look to implement. I myself also live in a multifamily building. And right, I think a lot of the questions are on how that collection will take place, whether there's a single consolidation point, right? If newer buildings are being considered having like a 3 trash chute system for now trash, recycling, and food waste. So I think a lot of that is still kind of in the works as well, and will really vary on location to location. So unfortunately, I can't really speak to that because that is on the individual commercial provider for the collection services and what type of programs they look to have.
What was the name of the organization or the type of organization that you're mentioning earlier? Recycla? I'm not familiar with that.
Recycla, and then let me go back on the slide here. Recycla. So the city back in 2017 basically standardized 7 haulers that are allowed to do the commercial collection throughout the city. Before it was an open system, so any waste hauler could provide services within the city. But back in 2017, it was standardized so that rates would be standardized throughout all of the system, as well as reporting requirements and facility requirements. So a lot of that information is now standardized through Recycla. So if you go onto the LA San website, you should be able to find information on Recycla, and you can see which Recycla service provider is responsible for the zone or portion of the city that you live in.
I see. So, but I guess you're saying then that each of these districts, these Recycla districts, if you will have their own kind of will have their own policy as to how to deal with food scraps in multi-unit dwellings. Is that right?
Yes. So the individual complex does have their requirement to subscribe, right? They do need to, per 1383, enroll in an organic service. What that looks like for each individual business or for each individual complex will probably vary based on how the complex is kind of set up and what type of programs or kind of creative alternatives the Recycla service provider can establish working with the complex and with the tenants to get that information out to them.
Okay, and just to be sure though, like each multi-unit building or each apartment building is required to kind of have some kind of program in some fashion. Okay.
Yes, so under 1383 they are.
Okay, great.
My understanding is there's a supply and demand issue that one of the reasons all this is delayed is because there's not the capacity, there aren't the vendors available to actually do the work necessary. So I'm not sure, maybe Eric can speak to this, but I don't know how the franchise folks are doing with this.
I'll just jump in. We are not prioritizing multifamily buildings because of logistically, it's very challenging, and the bigger, producers of food waste are, the tier 1 and tier 2, and so they're really being, targeted. But business and all businesses, of course, should enroll, but we are not actively seeking out multifamily buildings because it's pretty complicated.
And Eric, can you say who you are, please? And
yeah, I'm sorry. I'm a stakeholder in Echo Park Neighborhood Council and also in Silver Lake. I actually work for the recycler hauler, UWS in Northeast LA. So that's why I know some of these things.
All right, great. Thank you. And thanks, James. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for the question. I think next hand is Melanie.
Yeah, thank you for this. I think I'm kind of following on Nation because I'm a little confused. My complex manager said that the hauler was going to provide educational information for everybody in their service area. And it would be some unknown amount of time before they could get their systems working. I'm wondering if, a lot of work was put into working closely with the 7 haulers in developing Recycla. And it sounds like you're taking a hands-off approach right now. So I'm wondering how we keep track of this. Are they all held to the same standard? Do they all have a timeline that's similar? Are they coordinating with each other on some of this? Are there going to be 7 different kinds of educational materials out there for multifamily built units? 7 different timelines. It's very confusing because a lot of people live in multifamily units and more will be. So getting some clarity on that. I get questions on this all the time.
Yeah.
Who do we turn to?
So,
Hey, James, I can jump in on that.
oh yeah, thanks. Bob.
And this is Robert Potter. I'm the division manager over support services in LA San. Recycla has a provision in it for the organic service to be provided to everyone. It's not a mandated service. That changed once SB 1383 was enacted.
Right.
Now it's the mandatory organics recycling. So the haulers now who have these contracts are responsible for making that adjustment. They all meet together. They all have conversations. So I'm sure that the education outreach will be very well put together by the 7 haulers to make sure that the message is the same, but the mandatory requirement will be on the generators, right? So if you're in a multifamily, they're going to have to subscribe to service. The logistics part of it is challenging, right? Because you go from a 2-bin system to a 3-bin system. A lot of your multifamily buildings don't even have the space for the 2 bins. Now it's the 3rd bin, right? So right sizing, reducing the black bin, trying to make sure all that works is going to be the challenge that the Recycla providers will have, but that's going to be in their court. And I'm sure Eric, knowing that he works with Recycla, is constantly on top of that every day.
So just to clarify, when you say that each individual building is responsible for subscribing to the service, that implies an additional cost. It also puts the onus on the individual building, but the onus actually is on the waste hauler to comply with the law. So that makes it confusing as well.
Well, the onus is on everybody to recycle organics, right? It's a state law, and it's really an unfunded mandate if you want to be technically correct, right? They impose a law that's not funded to either the Recycla haulers or to the municipalities that must adhere to it. But it's the responsibility of the generator, right? The tier 1 generator, the farmer's market, the multifamily building, the commercial building, to partake in the reduction of organics in the black bin.
So single family homes have a support system and multifamily units are on their own.
I just want to jump in real quick. You can call your Recycla hauler. Actually, you can call LA Sanitation 24-hour hotline and request through option number 7, Recycla, and request an education that someone will reach out to you from your Recycla hauler and provide you with the educational materials, what the type of organic service you can right now get if you really want it. But as Robert said, the target is for the bigger businesses right now, and apartment buildings, due to logistics and also due to the amount that is lower down, the tier is lower down. The mandate is not in effect for you practically, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
It's-
that's very helpful. And James, can I ask you to stop sharing your screen? Because I think we're done with the slideshow and we're wrapping up, and it would be nice to be, thank you. Okay, let's try to wrap it up. This is a very rich conversation. We have not touched on many of the things I really wanted to touch on tonight, and that's the nature of the beast. But we've talked about a lot. Melanie, did you have more you wanted? I mean, I said I had a very similar conversation with James. It seems like, yeah. I mean, this is not a perfect system, and we are in the process of seeing the flaws in action. I think that's fair to say.
I appreciate that. It would be great if there were a place for communication, because to hear that it's the individual's building's responsibility, and that at the same time we can reach out to have the hauler talk to us, but we really can't, because the hauler really wants to talk to the building owner or the manager, and that gets different when it's an apartment versus a condo versus this versus that. So the issues and the trouble and the challenges maybe aren't being brought to the surface, and having some way to resolve and expedite and facilitate this for maybe some communities who aren't as engaged or active, because we're all after the end result and doing good stuff and reducing our emissions, not just, putting it off on somebody else's responsibility. So on behalf of those of us, there's the large number of us who live in multifamily buildings, it'd be great if there was an effort in SAN, just like there was to develop Recycla, to help facilitate a better transition in partnership with the haulers. Thanks, appreciate it.
Robert, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think we're good. I mean, it's a challenge that we're going to take on. Eric hit on it, that our target is going to be the tier 1, tier 2 generators, right? The large accounts that are producing a lot of food waste, and then we'll work our way into these more challenging situations, which are, especially the 5 and 6 unit, 7 unit apartment buildings that don't have space. So those are going to be real challenges. But we're going to tackle this. We have a targeted deadline, by the end of the year, and we're gonna go 100 miles an hour to make sure we meet our deadlines.
Okay, thank you. Helen.
Hopefully super quick question that adds on to this conversation. I was just curious if there's going to be, or if there already is, or if there will be a penalty for multifamily building owners if they don't comply within a certain timeline, because I have a feeling my building won't do it until they're forced or fined.
Well, the ordinance does have penalties, so they're down the road. They're not right away. They're not going to be happening immediately. I think the first start is in 2024 is when they'll start enforcement actions.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I know there has been a lot of chat that I cannot either keep up with. So is there anybody else who put something in the chat that they have not had answered yet, who would like to say it or ask it now to the group? Okay, I think not. So to be continued, this is a big conversation. I feel like we got
Lisa, I
yes.
think there was one more hand that was just raised, I think from Christine, it looks like.
Oh, okay, Christine, go for it.
I'll be super quick. It was someone's comment or question in the chat about the brown bin for the horse manure. If food waste could more easily be integrated into that composting system as opposed to trying to change the whole green bin situation. That was a question in there.
So I think the challenge with that is that there are very few residents that have a brown bin, whereas all of our residential customers have a green bin system as provided by LA San. I think I do recall there's a question earlier as well about if there are impacts in terms of trucking or additional trucks and the GHG related to that as we shift the collection. There really shouldn't be a major impact because we're using an existing bin. So right through right sizing and making our routes efficient, we'll be pulling waste out of the black bin, but really we're just moving that weight into the green bin. So green bin trucks may be collecting less households as opposed to what they were doing on their previous routes, but similarly, black bin trucks will be able to service more homes because there's less weight in those bins. So through right sizing and making sure our collection routes are efficient, there shouldn't be any major changes in terms of the impact of trucking associated with collecting the material. I think in terms of the collection, right, using the green bin as opposed to adding a fourth or in some residents' cases, a 5th bin for just food waste as opposed to changing the green bin. I think that's one of the major reasons we're going with this collection program rather than going to do food waste just by itself. Because right, if we were to add a truck or an additional bin to all 750,000 households, you know, that's a lot more trucks and a lot more drivers we need to bring on to collect a completely separate bin as opposed to integrating it into the green bin.
And think of all the emissions of all this schlepping around. That's one thing we didn't get to that I would like to get to. Okay, Beth, do you have a very quick comment or question? Beth? Okay, and so the question is being asked again, and I know this is really complicated, but what about fruits? Can they go in the green bin? I mean, I think the answer is yes. James might say the answer is no. I think you can do it even if James says no, he might say something different.
So technically only fruits and vegetables directly from your garden that have not been eaten or partially consumed can be placed in the green bin. Part of the challenge with that as well is also based on the permits that our existing facilities have. So as I mentioned, our green waste facilities that do this chipping and grinding, they may do minimal composting of green waste and can handle that incidental amount of vegetable waste directly from your garden. But really in terms of both their permit and also the type of processing that they provide, it should only be green waste until the program expands to allow all food waste by the end of the year.
So I guess the answer is if just the people on this call do it, it's okay. But if everybody in the city does it, it's really not okay. So I think that's kind of what you're trying to navigate. Is that fair?
Lisa, to be fair, like the way we process now, it's a sort and pick line. So they're focusing only on green waste. So if you put it in the green bin, it would get pulled out, thrown off the line, and then stuck in a truck and hauled to the landfill. So
Okay.
if it's in a better system, and then it would get processed and composted. So it'll end up in the same place. It'll end up in the landfill anyways, if it's pulled out of the line.
Okay. That's interesting. Thank you, Robert. Okay. Thank you so much, Robert and James. We'll have to have you back because there's so much more to discuss. And thank you, Eric, also for being kind of unofficially the guy from the holler perspective. That's super helpful. Thank you. More to discuss for sure and to be continued. And now we're going to move, of course. I'm sorry, what were you saying, James?
Oh, I was just going to say thanks for having us in.
Yeah, it was
Everyone
great.
should have my contact information from the end of the slide as well. And I'll get you a
Perfect.
copy of the slides to distribute out later, Lisa.
Perfect. That would be wonderful. Thank you, because they were great. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, it was a blast. Thanks for having us. And we're here anytime you need us.
Thank you, Robert. And Robert, this is his second time joining us. He helped us a ton when we were talking about other sorts of waste earlier.
Of course.
And we have to continue that conversation as well.
Of course. You guys have a great group, so I'm glad to participate at any time.
Thank you.
All right, have a great night. Okay,
as always, we are running late because there's just so much stuff to talk about, but I'm going to hand it over to Michael Schneider, who he heads up Streets for All. And he is heading up a huge, ambitious initiative that we're going to vote on tonight called Healthy Streets LA. So Michael, I invite you to introduce this effort.
Thank you, Lisa. Good evening, everybody. Lisa, do you want me to go through some slides? Do you just want me to talk about it? What would you prefer? I know you're running behind.
Probably just talk about it because we are behind. Thank you. Sorry about that.
I'll make it short and sweet. So transportation is the single biggest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions in California. And the city of Los Angeles passed a mobility plan full of over 1,500 miles of street improvements, including pedestrian safety improvements, bike lanes, bus lanes, and also improvements for cars and people that move freight. They have implemented 3% of it in 7 years. The LA Times covered our effort last week, and they calculated that at this rate, the city is going to need 200 years to implement their mobility plan that's supposed to be done by 2035. So we had a very simple nuclear option idea, which we've now turned into a ballot measure which is to force the city to implement its own plan whenever they repave a street. So if there's a planned bike lane or bus lane or crosswalk on a street, they would not be able to repave it without actually following their own plan. This has been agendized at over 30 neighborhood councils. It's passed 4 so far. We have 100 volunteers running around collecting signatures. We need 65,000 signatures by the end of May. The website is healthystreetsla.com, which I will also put in the chat if you want to learn more. And yeah, I think that's the short and sweet. We'd love your support. I believe there's already a letter written, and happy to answer any questions.
Muriel, did you want to add anything as the chair of the Transportation Committee?
I think in terms of like the vote, or
Sure, I think it would just be helpful to share what happened at the Transportation Committee.
so I had the Transportation Committee vote on the letter that would support the measure. We kind of like decided to kind of vote on, I guess, like a letter that kind of truncates the original letter, but it is still based on the measure. And it was like about 12 or like 12 to 1 yes to no vote. So we kind of want to bring it to the board for an like official vote to support. So do you just want to start the vote now, or?
Well, let's see if people have conversation, but just to be clear, the Transportation Committee voted overwhelmingly in support of this. I don't remember who voted against, but most of us are in support of this. Jiyoung and then Ed, and let's try to keep it tight because we do want to, there are 2 building decarbonization motions we're going to try to get to tonight, folks. So we have a lot more to do, just so you know. Jiyoung.
Thanks. So I'm very much in support of this. I voted in favor of it in the Transportation Committee. I've also agendized it for the Silver Lake Neighborhood Council Governing Board meeting this Wednesday. So if anybody wants to support it, please attend and speak in support. It's actually on the consent calendar, so hopefully it doesn't get pulled. But anyway, this is really important because council members are choosing not to implement the mobility plan when there's already repaving going on. And so Sunset for All initially started as an effort to add the bike lanes when the repaving was happening during the pandemic, and our council member didn't listen to us, didn't listen, because I did sign that petition. And you know, it really can't be, this can't be left up to the discretion of council members. It was created as a plan for a reason, for so many different reasons. And if a council member doesn't want to implement it, too bad. Like it should happen anyway. This is it. The mobility plan needs to be implemented, whether or not a council member wants that or not. And my council member is not the only one who has chosen not to implement the mobility plan, and so I'm very much in favor of this.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to take 3 more comments, and then I'm going to hope we can take it to a vote. If that works, we'll try. Ed, quickly, please. Sorry.
Sure. So not so much myself, it's my neighborhood council that is not in favor of this particular motion because we're in a very high fire risk area and there were perceived problems during past evacuations related to horses, related to humans, related to other things, and it was because of bike lane management. So there is kind of a connotation that this must be reviewed because it's a public safety issue. And I think sometimes, you know, that's what's so great about this system, neighborhood councils. You get to hear about us in the foothills relative to those in the South Bay and, you know, the West Side, whatever. this is an issue that we have to follow too.
Thank you. Michael, did you want to respond or not?
I mean, I would just say people often say that bike lanes block emergency vehicles and other things. In many cases, especially in a real emergency, the bike lane can actually speed things up. This is also not just about bikes. There's bus lanes. So if there's a bus only lane in emergency, that could be used by cars. And the last thing I'll say is this doesn't preclude neighborhood engagement. LADOT still has to go have a conversation with the neighborhood. They have to implement the plan, but they can have discussions about how to implement the plan and the configuration that would make the most sense for the community.
Thank you. That's super helpful. Nish.
Yeah, sorry, I have a more of a procedural question here. So as the D-Link bylaws are written, like I am not allowed to vote. I can only like advise the council as to how I suggest that they might want to, if they might want to write support letters or actually, or, if we are going to take a vote, like I come to them about pending vote in the future neighborhood council or sustainability alliance meeting and like how they would like for me to vote. So my question was first, apologies if I didn't read the emails that you sent out thoroughly, but I was wondering if this that there would be a vote, if a vote would be happening in this meeting, if that was mentioned in that email, and if not, if just kind of just for future emails that you send out,
Yes.
if you can kind of let us know in
Sorry,
advance.
yes, it was mentioned. We did tell you. And sorry,
All right.
we're gonna move more quickly.
Yeah. Sorry for that.
That's okay. Thank you. Joanne. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was muted. I think that we have a problem with the plan because there's no tree element for the preservation of existing trees, as far as I know. And we've had situations where bike lanes were introduced at the expense of tree canopy. So at this point, I don't think I can be for this unless there was an amendment for it, that it didn't remove any trees.
Thoughts, Michael?
I'm unclear why a bike lane would need to remove a tree. Could you be any more specific on that, Joanne? I've just never heard of anything like that.
Well, if you look at that project that was going to happen on Melrose, they were going to take out the street trees on Melrose to make room for the bike lanes.
So first of all, I live just by there and I worked on that project. There's hardly any trees on Melrose right now, actually, and they were going to plant a bunch of new trees as part of that project. Also, that project is very different than the mobility plan. Melrose does have a protected bike lane on the mobility plan, but that project was a Streets LA project with concrete elements to have LA's first curb level European style protected bike lane. Unfortunately, or fortunately perhaps, the mobility plan, the treatment would be in the street. So a protected bike lane would be in the street. You wouldn't need to remove a tree.
So you're
put a
just
protected
using
bike
the
lane.
existing street. You're not
Right of way. That's correct.
You're not interfering with the sidewalk at all.
That's correct. The mobility plan does not touch the sidewalk.
I get it. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Liz.
I'm not familiar with this particular plan, but I have witnessed and have strong concerns about safety. I live in Highland Park. York Boulevard used to be 2 lanes both directions. They put in a bike lane and a center turning lane. Theoretically, fire engines were supposed to be able to use the turning lane. Instead, what it functions as is a passing lane for cars, and more importantly, trucks who have to deliver goods because they no longer can double park in that lane, creating hazardous situations. How are you addressing this in this particular instance?
I think the answer is loading zones. I think we need a lot more loading zones throughout the city. So bike lanes and bus lanes don't interfere with the necessary delivery of goods and services. The center turn lane should not be used for someone loading or unloading something. That's an improper use of it.
Right, but the thing is, where do people park? This is an area that is short on parking in the first place. You have parking, you have bikes in too narrow a lane, you have one lane, one direction, you have the turning lane, you have the other lane. Where do these people park? It's a main street with businesses.
The hope is that by building out a connected network of bike lanes that people feel safe in throughout the city, that would reduce the demand for so much parking. 50% of trips in Los Angeles are 3 miles and under. There's a tremendous opportunity to get people out of their cars for the shorter trips and reduce the need for parking if the infrastructure was just better.
Okay, thank you. Steve?
I was just curious to know, those council people who aren't supporting it, what their major reasons are for not supporting it.
In 2015, you mean?
Yeah, the mobility plan, whatever,
Yeah.
you know, what are their, I mean, I hate to ask you to present their position, but it would be good to know.
So it was passed in 2015, a 13-2 vote. The two people that did not vote in favor were Paul Koretz and Gil Cedillo. Gil Cedillo, I mean, you'd have to ask him. My take, he likes bus lanes a lot. In 2017, someone who was backed by the cyclist community ran against him. And I think, frankly, he's held a grudge. He has not allowed, he's allowed hardly any new bike lanes in his district and has some of the most dangerous streets in this district for cyclists and pedestrians. Paul Koretz is an environmentalist that doesn't want to do much to help people get out of their cars. And he has vetoed or interfered with nearly every bike project in Council District 5 for years. And he doesn't believe that people will get out of their cars to get on a bike or take transit. On the La Brea bus lane project, he made a comment like, I'm not in favor of giving up peak hour driving just so other people can transit through our community, as if, you know, people in the community couldn't use transit. So that's as much as I'll say. I mean, you'd have to ask them, but that's my take.
Okay, thank you. Cheryl?
Hi, my name's Cheryl, and I'm the Environment Chair in Hollywood Hills West Neighborhood Council. I'm also a commuter cyclist. I don't use a car. So I'd like to speak in favor of this initiative, or supporting this initiative. But basically, I heard some people questioning, you know, well, how are you going to do this on this street or do this on that street? And I just want to remind people, I think people already know, but this has already been passed by the city. So they're going to have to supposedly make these decisions going forward already, because it's been adopted by the city. Now we just want the city to go forward and, you know, implement. However, I think that if we actually implemented bike lanes, you would be taking thousands and thousands of cars off the streets. You know, if I had a nickel for every time I heard, oh, I'd bike, if there was bike lanes, I'd do it in a minute, I'd literally be a billionaire. I hear that from people all the time. So I just think that some of the safety issues that you're concerned about would be reduced by removing cars, not adding bikes.
All right, thank you. Melanie, quickly, and then we'll go to a vote.
Very quickly, I just wanted to say that the 2015 mobility plan was a long process that involved all the neighborhood councils, that involved numerous city departments to decide where these improvements would go. So it's a plan that's been adopted after a massive public engagement, collaborative process that some people on this call were involved with, and some of your predecessors were involved with. And so it's not just put stuff places. It's been vetted, it's been through, it's had a lot of input already. And not to say we can't do better in certain cases, and this allows room for that, but there's been a lot of input on this for a long time. So that should provide some measure of comfort to some of the concerns I'm hearing raised. Check.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're ready to vote. Muriel, are you ready?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Lisa?
Yes.
Okay, I vote yes. Lorraine?
Yes.
Thank you. Ji Young?
Absolutely, yes.
Awesome. Okay, Charlene,
Hi, I didn't know I had a vote.
She's not a vote. She's not a voting
Yeah,
member.
not a voter on this one.
My mistake, I will change it.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Cheryl Holland.
Yes.
Thank you. Christine Mills.
Yes.
Thank you. Dan Kegel.
I abstain.
Okay. Ed Novi.
No.
No. Ernie Hidalgo. Hidalgo.
Yes, and I'd like to suggest that in a future meeting, maybe in person, we do a signature gathering before May.
Thank you. Jean Gilbert.
Yes.
Thank you. Glenn Bailey.
Yes.
Thank you. Jesselyn.
She's not here, but I believe I am our secondary voter.
Yeah, Jesselyn
Oh,
isn't
okay.
here.
Yes, you are. She was here earlier. Go ahead.
Yes, yeah, she was here earlier. Sorry for the confusion. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Joanne.
Joanne?
Okay. John Hales or Michelle Hales. I can't tell which one was.
I'm sorry, I was muted. That was a yes.
Oh, sorry, Joanne. Did you vote yes or no on the?
I voted yes. I'm sorry, I was muted. I didn't realize it.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. It's okay.
John is the rep.
John. Okay. John Hales.
Abstain.
I don't think they're reps actually, so we should check on.
Okay.
Yeah, they're not reps.
Okay.
Yes, they are for North. Yes, they're for North Hills. Sorry, Northridge South.
Oh, John, you are the one that Ann emailed me about.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that was you. I'm sorry. I think, okay.
I'm
got
sorry.
it.
You abstained, John? I'm sorry.
Yes, abstain.
Okay, sorry. I know all of them. Kathy Schaefer. Kathy. Melanie Winter.
Yes.
Thank you. Nish.
Abstain.
Thank you. Philip Ganchev.
Yes.
Thank you. Raquel Valencia.
Yes.
Thank you. Stephanie. She left. Okay, sorry. She left. Mary Louise. Mary Louise Morgan. Okay.
I'm unmuted. Can you
Oh.
hear me now? Yes.
Oh, yes.
I do not have permission to vote.
Oh, okay.
Abstain. Thank you.
I'm so I don't understand.
She abstained. She can't vote.
Abstain. Okay.
Can't
Okay.
vote.
Laura.
Yes.
Laura, awesome. Okay. And Pat Bates.
Yes.
So Pat, okay. So we have
Hmm.
16. Oh my gosh.
Anyway, we know it passed, right?
Yeah, it's 16. I'm just trying to figure out which ones are the no's. 1 no and 16, 1, 3.
Great.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, everybody. And we will get that letter in.
Thank you so much. Have
And
a good meeting.
as whoever suggested, if you want to help with the effort, you can reach out to Michael and he will get you set up to help.
Thanks
All right.
again. Good night.
So I was far too ambitious, which is a flaw of mine. So we're not going to have a vote on building decarbonization tonight, but and Dan has been very gracious. He's going to share with you I think briefly the motions and fact sheet so we hope discuss them next month. They're not super time sensitive, so this is okay. Dan, where did you go?
I'm here. Let
And
me
Dan is
share
our
my-
Energy Committee Chair.
Yes, could you let me share my screen?
Sure, sorry.
Okay. So I'm going to dum-de-dum.
Okay, you should be able to.
Yes. I hope you can see this. So there's two council files related to building decarbonization that are very important for the city. The first one, 21-1463, is about the general topic and sort of mostly about existing buildings. This one sailed through Energy Committee already and is at some point going to be up at the city council for a vote. I think that it is going to be okay. It's important, but it's not hurting. The second council file, 22-0151, fits in with the first one, but talks mainly about new buildings. And it has to go through four committees before it goes to the main council. And every one of those committees is a chance for somebody to hold it up. And so I think that 22-0151, which will help us start shutting off the tap for natural gas in new homes carefully and sensibly, is going to be really important for things like shutting down Aliso Canyon. And so please read these fact sheets. I think we can email them out to you before next month's meeting so we can vote on whether the NCSA should take a position on these.
They were actually
Did I-
emailed to you. I emailed them to you Friday morning. If you look at the link, they're in the link for the event. You can see the links to both of these fact sheets.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Did I cover that?
I think so. Any very, very quick, speedy questions or comments? Okay, great. Let's move on.
I'm sorry, I was trying to find my raise hand feature.
Sure, sorry.
Very quick, Dan. The thing I think is going to come up the most is how does this affect the cost of producing new housing, right? We have a housing crisis. How do you?
Oh, Ernie,
respond to that
good question.
Yep.
Good question. The analyses I've seen show that it is cheaper to produce all electric homes, especially multifamily, and also cheaper to operate them, especially multifamily. That is from an analysis from 2 years ago. And of course, things may have changed, but it is still a good investment, and it is more comfortable to boot because the houses that are all electric are better insulated, and the heat pumps provide more consistent heating instead of going full blast and then getting cold. So
fantastic.
So, yeah, as we get more and more cheaper, cleaner energy, the transition, it's like it's kind of the opposite of a vicious cycle. It's a
virtuous cycle.
A virtuous cycle. Thank you. That's exactly what's starting to happen. So as we keep going, the cleaner energy is going to be cheaper and the dirtier energy is going to be more expensive. And that's what we're already starting to see, which is a relief, frankly. Okay, so I apologize that we didn't get to this tonight, but we will aim to get to these next month. So now I'm going to move to our committee and program updates. Let's see if I can find those slides, and we'll do these pretty quickly, I think. The advocacy committee next month, just so you know, next month, we'll be hearing from Andy Schrader of Councilmember Paul Koretz's office on, so Paul Koretz, in my opinion, I should just say my opinion, is not strong on transportation, but he's very, very strong on many other arenas, including wildlife corridors. And Andy Schrader from his office is going to come and speak with us about a vision for wildlife corridors that is coming to fruition. So it's super, super exciting. And connected to that, I think we'll have a couple votes about how to push forward some of the motions we need in order to get us there. And also there's a lot of stuff going on with plastics, which is really, really exciting. So that's from the advocacy committee. Also, I wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of the Climate Equity LA series. This is from the Climate Emergency Mobilization Office, which many of us have worked very hard to get up and running. It is up and running. And starting March 3rd, every Thursday, 4 Thursdays in a row, there is going to be a forum on this. And it's going to be conversations in which people are going to want to hear from us, from frontline communities, from people on the ground about how we want to see our city move forward as we transition to cleaner energy and cleaner policies that will help us mitigate the climate crisis. So this is a super, super exciting series, and I really encourage you all to join. I will try to put a link to this in the chat. And I also sent a link to it in the last email I sent you, sorry, that I sent from the a week or so ago, sorry. Okay, moving on, cool blocks. I just wanted to share, so our first cohort is up and going. We're learning a lot. It's a bit wild right now. There's so much going on, but super exciting. And this is just a list of some of the departments and organizations and offices we're working with. I just wanted to share this with you, just so you appreciate what a big effort this is. And many of you on this call are Cool Block or future Cool Block leaders. So thank you, thank you, thank you, and to be continued. Okay, Dan, more on the Energy Committee.
Yes, so we already talked about it all. It's very exciting, though.
Very
Please
cool.
show up at our meetings. We can talk about exactly what to do about decarbonization.
And it is very exciting. I really saw Dan perk up for the first time in a while when these things came up. This is a big deal, you guys. For those of you who aren't in our Energy Committee, we have been working on this for years, and it's finally happening, and it is super, super, super exciting.
And
Okay.
let me just say, if you go back one slide for a sec, the Climate Equity Series, that's an outreach event where citizens are going to help steer city climate policy, especially with regard to buildings. And when we participate in that and put in our 2 cents about, yes, we need building decarbonization, and yes, we need to protect renters, I think it's going to make a difference and help insulate us from the bad companies out there who don't want it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And the cool thing about this is you don't have to be a citizen. You can be an undocumented person and still participate. You can still participate in your neighborhood council system, and you can still participate in the Climate Equity LA series. So just have to be a stakeholder in LA. Muriel, transportation.
Oh, so we covered a lot in our meeting from the 3rd, and coincidentally, our next meeting is also on the 3rd of this upcoming month. We went over a draft version of the committee charter, and we're still kind of fine tuning that. Michael Schneider presented his Healthy Streets LA that we had to vote on, and we eventually got to vote on tonight. There was a transit oriented communities update by Nancy. There were next steps to take for the Sepulveda for All, mainly just trying to see if there's going to be any support for asking for the Sepulveda corridor to, add stops for the Metro and UCLA. And then finally, a committee member named Alex Tangelos is looking for projects for her law firm Anti-Racism Alliance. So if anyone wants to reach out with any projects for funding, you could reach out to me at murielmccar@gmail.com if you want to reach out to her for those projects.
It's an alliance of law firms who want to do stuff pro bono, meaning free. So if you want help and you think we can talk about it more offline, but they might be able to help. Okay, trees, Joanne.
Yes, the Trees Committee meets bi-monthly. We're not on the calendar right now. We're meeting March 19th, which is a Saturday, and we're meeting from 1:30 to 3:30 on Zoom. We usually have a few agenda items, but we have been having a program at every meeting. And this upcoming one, CEQA, you all know what CEQA is, right? The California Environmental Quality Act. A CEQA attorney, Jamie Hall, is going to present on SB 9, and it will, which you all know, passed. And this will be an update on the city's proposed implementation and what that's going to do potentially to trees, woodlands, and open space loss. And what can we do? As the city gets hotter and we lose more trees, this is a serious concern. And the other part of the program will be the city of Los Angeles has a landscape ordinance, and it's not been very well enforced. And this has been brought to the attention of the planning department. And so the Urban Design Center and some others are working on a revamping of it. And I don't know exactly if we're going to have any more enforcement, but we may be losing some items that provided for landscape, and we're concerned. So we'd like to get involved. So I'm going to do a little dive into the ordinance and what things are at stake. So if you'd like to come, it's open to everyone, and you need to get the Zoom from me at trees@ncsa.la, and I'm happy to send it to you when the agenda is ready, and the Zoom link will be on it. And that's it. If you have any questions for me too, or you would like to challenge any tree removals, it's always good to keep me in the loop when you do that, because if other people are challenging, then we can get people together so that they have a stronger voice. So that's my email, and feel free to use it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, my only announcement is one I already said, which is next month, March 13th, I believe, we'll talk about wildlife corridors and what's possible and what we need to do to help get us there. And of course, we'll talk about building decarbonization. Anybody else want to share any announcements very quickly, because we're 4 minutes over?
Yeah, Lisa, this is Jamie from City Planning.
Hi, Jamie.
Hi. Really quickly, I have an update from the LA City Planning Department. Once again, my name is Jamie Huang. I'm a community liaison with City Planning. Just wanted to join the meeting tonight to share that City Planning has determined that they want to move forward with folding in the Ridgeline Ordinance into the existing wildlife pilot study, which was initiated in 2016 in response to a Paul Koretz motion. I'm going to drop a link in the chat so you can find out more information about that. The department plans to have an update that incorporates community feedback on this, hopefully sometime late spring of this year. I'm just going to save us all time and drop the link in the chat. And I'm going to paste my email address again in case anyone has any follow-up questions, but I'll wrap it up here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. I had that mentioned on my slide, but I didn't take the time to mention that We did see that and we have discussed that, and we are concerned about that because we don't see the resources being put behind it. And we see that the wildlife pilot study has just not moved forward in, gosh, so long that I don't know how long it's been. So we have concerns about that. So maybe we should follow up and continue talking about that with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to align timelines with you. And like I said, the department is moving forward with the pilot and should have an update in late spring, but I'm new to the team, so I don't know the full backstory here. So yeah, would love to, touch base with it, but I know we're reaching end of our time here. So I'll wrap up for now. Thanks.
That's great to hear. Thanks. So we can continue that conversation. Thank you, Jamie. Anybody else? Glenn, I know you always have something for us. Are you still here? Maybe he left. Gosh. Okay. There he is.
I'll do it later. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Any other announcements? Okay, I think we're good. Thank you, folks. Thank you for bearing with us, even though we're over time. Great conversation, great questions, to be continued, and have a good evening and stay safe and healthy if you're able to.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, Lisa.
Great job.
Yeah. Okay, there you go.
Hey, Lisa,
Yes. Hi, Steve.
are you aware of a divestment activity that's going to take place in April? And it's organized by the Shalom